For the last 18 years, we have not seen a world without genetically modified organisms.
What are GMOs, and what could they be doing to our health as humans? Let's go talk to a few people and find out what they have to say.
I think the simplest way to explain what a GMO is to say that it's taking the genes from one species, moving them across a species barrier, and inserting them in the DNA of a different species in a way that would never happen in nature. So a lot of people get confused between hybridization and genetic modification. So with hybridization, you are creating species through breeding that could possibly exist in nature. It's a natural process, although albeit aided by people. Genetic modification, however, is done in a laboratory, and they literally take the gene from one species into a gun and insert it into another species. BT corn, for example, is grown so that the corn is its own pesticide, and it's a corn crossed with a bacteria, and the bacteria causes the stomachs of the insects to explode, just killing the insects. So, of course, what would that do in your body? Well, we don't know, because there have never been any long-term studies on the effects of GMOs in the human diet.
Over 80% of the food in North America contains genetically modified organisms.
The top genetically modified crops are corn, soy, canola, sugar beets, cottonseed, the Hawaiian papaya, and zucchini. These crops are not the only things that could contain GMOs. Animals such as cows, pigs, and poultry are often fed grain products that have been derived from corn and soy that has been genetically modified. Therefore, the meat, dairy, and eggs that comes from these animals could also be contaminated with GMOs. There is so much information surrounding GMOs, including the environment and politics, but let's just focus in on what they could be doing to our health as humans.
So what are the possible concerns that people might have now that we have genetically modified foods pervasive all over the planet? The problems would be multiple-fold. Number one, the consumption of the GMO foods themselves. So have we proven that the Bt toxin, for example, that's produced in Bt modified corn, it's an insecticide, that is expressed in every single cell of a plant, a known toxin that can create pores, intestinal permeability in animals and cells. So what would be the problem if we built up this Bt toxin in people, for example? Because in Quebec we found that 90+% of pregnant women and over 80% of their offspring had Bt toxins circulating around in their blood. So what would be a problem? Well, that could create an intestinal permeability issue. It can cause a barrier leakage. So the intestinal tract is normally relatively tight. If there's a Bt toxin to irritate the intestines, it could cause pores to form. Those pores, the gaps in the tight junctions, would allow then food to pass through, bacterium to pass through. That could then cause a host of inflammatory disorders. We now know that leaky gut is attached to almost all autoimmune diseases, whether you're looking at lupus, MS, type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. We know that the leaky gut itself has been attached to obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. So that would be its own Pandora's box.
When you create these new organisms, you're creating something that, as I said, one, has never existed in nature, and two, has a greater potential to have defects in the DNA chain. And those defects are what people think may be causing a lot of allergies and health-related issues around eating GMOs.
Let's go back and let's say, how about the allergenicity of the genetically modified foods? There have been a couple of cases, peas for example, that were modified, that the pea itself was mistaken as an egg. So the immune cells in the intestinal tract would identify the peptide sequence, the amino acid sequence that was genetically modified, as looking similar to an egg, and would launch an attack against it. So the similarity of the frequency could cause allergenic reactions. We honestly don't know what the extent is, but gosh, there's some new data showing, I've worked on a paper with Stephanie Seneff and Jeffrey Smith and Sayer G and Tom O'Brien looking at the rise of gluten intolerance and the consumption of GMOs, and that we looked at the potential of leaky gut with Bt toxin and potentially with microbiome imbalances and how that might be leaving a susceptibility. And now Stephanie Seneff is going on to say, wait a second, there are enzyme functions that are altered. You may be preparing the wheat because of its interaction with the Roundup to be in a shape that's more antigenic, that's more problematic, that the immune cells might look at and start responding to. Gosh, I think the sky is really the limit when it comes to once you have a leaky gut and you have proteins around, foreign proteins around. We now know that some of the genetically modified soy will have an incredible increase of something called a trypsin inhibitor. So it actually inhibits the digestion of certain peptides from proteins, so you might not be able to get enough of those in. If we backtrack and we say, what a Roundup primary mechanism, it interrupts this pathway that allows us to produce tryptophan and phenylalanine and tyrosine. Is it any wonder then we've seen a 400% increase of neurological issues, attention deficit problems, autism that are associated with low levels of these neurotransmitters that come from those amino acids. Up to 50% of someone's folate supplies could be coming from their gut. Vitamin K2 comes from their gut bacterium. B6 comes from gut bacterium. There are so many different aspects that rely on a healthy microbiome that the minute we say either the Bt toxin could be disrupting the environment, or the glyphosate could be disrupting the environment, or the allergenic proteins could be disrupting the environment, then you can basically extrapolate a whole host of diseases from there. There are no human studies. We have no idea how they ever made it into the food supply without long-term safety studies on the population. Seems absolutely insane. Anybody with a scientific mind would say, come on, you've got to think twice before you would do anything like this.
As a mother who cares about what I feed my kids and my family, it's a dangerous proposition to let these seeds out of the bag, so to speak, without any idea of the impact on the organism, on the human organism or any other organism, period.
I don't know what the repercussions are going to be long term, but I can tell you that when you look at Nancy Swanson's charts right here, right now, from 1996 through 2007, 2009, 2010, depending on what you're looking at, whether it's thyroid cancers or whether you're looking at autism. Autism has increased 7 times since then. Allergies have increased 50% over the first couple years of introduction of soy. We've had thyroid cancers, 2.5 time increase, ADD, ADHD, autism, hyperactivity. I've already said 7 for the autism, but the neurological issues, atypical bipolar disorder, it's almost a 400% increase. So we don't know. I mean, no one's really wanting to admit to the fact that these are associated, and if they could be associated, it would be disastrous to some of our major corporations on this planet. So I would say personally, if we continue down this highway recklessly on the wrong side that we're going to have an accident, and we'll probably run across something that's not going to work with our genetics and might end up creating a disease we don't even know about yet.
Where is it headed? There's just no information. There's been no real long-term studies ever done. So the real fear is the unknown. We really don't know what we've gotten into.
These are untested. There has never been a long-term human study on the effects of GMOs in the diet, ever.
In order to make really clear choices for you and your family, you have to have information, and you have to be able to trust the information. And because there have been no longitudinal long-term studies on the health impacts of GMOs on a human population, how can you make a good choice? The information simply isn't there.
If you are interested in keeping GMOs out of your diet, there are a few simple rules you can follow. Avoid processed foods, especially those containing genetically modified crops and ingredients. A list of ingredients that are likely to be derived from GMO sources can be found at gmoinside.org. Purchase foods that have been certified non-GMO by the Non-GMO Project. You will find all of the companies and products that have been enrolled in the Non-GMO Project at nongmoproject.org. Look for foods that have been certified organic by the USDA. When eating out, ask what is in your food. Find out if the ingredients come from non-GMO sources. Now go look into your pantry. Are you eating genetically modified foods?